let's go ahead and get started. Editors are busy, and we thank you so much for talking to our community today. Maggie, I wanted to check before this how to say your last name so I didn't butcher it.
It's Villiger with a hard G.
Okay, I'm so glad I didn't say it out loud. We
Most
have
people say it and say it wrong, so thank you for asking.
You're welcome. So we have Maggie and then Jennifer Weeks, and they're both editors at The Conversation, and they're going to talk to us today. First, a little about coronavirus and the whole whirlwind of stories that are coming in about that, and then how to pitch and write with The Conversation. And I'll let them do their introductions, and also will tell you if they want questions during or at the end. So I'll turn it over to you two.
Okay, so first, I think we're fine with you interrupting if you have a question, and don't worry about interrupting the flow. It's better to get to the question than forget what we were talking about
And
along the
there's
way.
to interrupt you initially, there's like a hand raising thing in Zoom that I always forget where it is, but that you can do that. You can unmute yourself or you could ask a question in the comments if you have one.
So I am Maggie Villiger. I'm the Senior Science and Technology Editor at The Conversation US. And the reason I'm talking first and then going to hand the floor over to Jenny is that I'm in the middle of coronavirus central at this moment. So I'm just going to be brief. We thought it might be interesting to just run through and give you a sense of the types of stories that we're thinking about and how we're getting them out to our general audience. So all the writing on our site is done by folks like you, academic, well, on our desks, academic scientists, and edited by the journalists on staff and aimed at the general public. So obviously this is a big story around the world, and The Conversation is really specially positioned to cover it because we have sister sites all across the globe. So I'm just going to share my screen and show you the spreadsheet that we're working with here. Let's see if I can get this to work. Are you seeing a spreadsheet? So this is just to give you a sense of how many stories about coronavirus we are interested in and chasing. And they range from everything from, am I going to get coronavirus? Where is the vaccine in terms of development, and ranging to things that are a little more general. How do viruses mutate? I just commissioned one from some scientists. Maybe you guys know of this work at Colorado State University, that they basically toss a bunch of animals and pathogens together into a room and watch how transmission happens in real time and sort of more real world conditions, trying to make it like a wet market in Asia. So we even have stuff like this one: plasma reactor neutralizes airborne viruses. We're coming at it from every angle. So sort of deep sciencey type stuff, more consumer health type things that people are wondering about. Let me stop sharing. I don't think you guys care too much about that visual. So something like the coronavirus outbreak is a really great opportunity if you have any research that's like sort of tangentially related. This is a great, well, I mean, it's bad for the world probably, but it's a great news peg for you to think about if you have anything that's related to epidemiology or basic virology, or like those guys in Colorado, like thinking outside the box on how to research disease interactions. So even things that aren't specifically about coronavirus are rising up in our level of interest at this time, as just viruses in general and disease, and is the US prepared for the next pandemic, all kinds of stuff. So I will leave you in a moment, but the thought that I would leave you with, hopefully, is that current events are great things for you to keep an eye on, just as an informed individual, but also as a scientist who wants to connect your work with things that people care about. Keep an eye on the news, keep an eye on even like what movies are out, or is there a book that has a theme that your work relates to? All that kind of stuff is a reason why people might be interested in whatever kinds of shades of gray your research can add to the general conversation around a topic. So although coronavirus might not be good news, especially for the people who have caught it so far, it might be a great time to surface particular research that's out there. Jenny, did you have any thoughts in that realm before you go on?
Well, just on the idea of coronavirus as a hook for things, one actual silver lining to it that I saw mentioned today is that China has suspended its wildlife trade until they've got the virus under control, because, they have markets where people sell, civet cats and all this stuff like that. And that clearly is a risk for transmission. That's an exciting opportunity for people who work on wildlife trafficking and those issues to say, why not just shut it down? So that's, and I know that some advocacy groups are getting into that space, but it's an interesting, if people think about zoonotic diseases and ways that they can jump on opportunities like that, it's a great time to raise those issues. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be how the virus gets transmitted and will I get sick. There can be all these kinds of other connected things.
Good point. All right, so I'm gonna head out and edit an article about what is a super spreader, but you're in good hands with Jenny.
Right.
Take it away, Jenny.
Thanks so much, Maggie.
Okay. Let me see. I will back up just a little bit. We just thought that coronavirus is in the news and really interesting and a big story, so we thought we'd just kind of kick off with that. But let me back up just a little bit, and for anybody who isn't familiar with our site, just say a little bit about it, and I can actually go to our page and show you a few things on it. There are 9 conversation sites around the world. We're all sort of part of the same network, and we all do the same thing: publish articles by scholars at colleges and universities, edited by journalists who know the topic that they work in. I'm the environment and energy editor here at the Conversation US, and aimed at the general public. So pure general interest readers. We are going for people who are not necessarily, not only not scholars, but not scientists, not policy people. I always tell scholars when I'm talking to them to envision your reader as someone reading news on their phone on the bus on the way to work in the morning and just looking to learn something interesting. And reaching a person like that is very different from reaching someone in either a scholarly journal or even maybe, a magazine for your field or something like that, like a more sort of professional thing, like, Science magazine with the news stories or something. You are not looking for people who are coming straight to your outlet going, I want my science. People are skimming through and you're competing with, Kobe Bryant and all kinds of other stuff for their attention. So it's a very different way of writing and presenting things. And we're founded because some smart journalists who came up with this concept thought scholars don't get any incentives or rewards to do this kind of communicating, but it's really important. And so there ought to be an outlet that is there to help them do it. And so that's what we're like. The stories we publish are mainly the main types we do, although we are trying to mix them up and we're playing with some new forms now. The most typical ones we do are either reports on new research. So someone has a study coming out in a journal or a report that they've done for some big forum, and they write a piece for us, here's my study, how I did it, what I found, why it's important, although more excitingly than that, that's the general gist of it. Or a commentary on things going on now. So commentaries on things associated with coronavirus would obviously be a thing now, but not a sort of, what we really try not to do is what many typical editorials that you see in newspapers do, which is, this is a terrible disgrace, we must do X right now. A typical editorial is selling some kind of a call to action. We don't really do that. What we're aiming for is much more a sort of research-based, knowledge-based, here's what my knowledge and my scholarship can show you. It's kind of a nuance, but it's something that we find that scholars feel much more comfortable with, many of them, than with saying, we must do this now. So on the environment desk, I get a lot of pitches, especially around, UN climate meetings and things like that. We have to act. We have to tell people how urgent it is. We have to tell them why 1.5 degrees is, has got to be where we stop. We don't do those. We have done a very few, why I'm marching for science, but that's really not what we're doing. We're looking much more for people explaining and providing sort of a reasoned perspective on things. It doesn't mean that they can't have a point of view, but it has to come from the research and the scholarship, not from I feel so strongly about this. So that is one important thing to know about writing for us, is that we're not looking for those manifestos. There are places for manifestos. There are places that publish really good ones. It's just not what we do. Because, I mean, partly there are a lot of manifestos out there now. There's a lot of opinion. There is less fact-based commentary than we think there could be. So anyway, so that's gives some idea of what we do. The target length for our articles is a maximum of 1,000 words, so clearly way less than a journal article, or even than like a long commentary piece. But it's the level, it's about half again longer than a newspaper op-ed. So it's enough room to present an idea, give a couple of different angles on it, raise some questions, and sign off. And it really is sort of, it's what a lot of the places that republish our stories say, this is the maximum we want. So it is a real emphasis on being concise, and we help a lot with that in the editing process. The idea of saying just enough about your subject as opposed to let me tell you everything is one of the things that it's sometimes, especially for scientists, because you're so used to presenting all your data. Let me tell you all the different things I counted to figure this out. Let me tell you all the different variants we ran on this model. Backing off from that is sometimes a challenge for them. But it's really important, because especially when you're trying to reach a general interest reader who, unlike someone in your field, doesn't want to know about all the different variants on your model that you tried, you really have to understand not to sort of scare them off with all that stuff. So 1,000 words, pretty concise. And we're also experimenting with some shorter forms. We're working on a new one called a research brief that's basically, here's the cool thing we found in this study, here's how we did it, what's next, and some other cool things in the field. We do a lot of little explainers. We have a format called Curious Kids that it answers questions submitted by literal kids, written to a middle school reading level. So I've edited ones on why do birds sing and what can we learn from studying scat. The kid who submitted that one actually said scat and not poop, so I was very impressed. So we have fun with lots of things like that. We've done those in non-science areas too. Why is money green? Why do I have to do homework? When they get at big questions, and we publish those without a Curious Kids header on them, and they get picked up and go in a lot of places. So people just see these as fun, short answers to things. So, informing people doesn't always have to be a ton of information and a really intricate argument. Sometimes it can be something very simple. Let me just say one thing about republishing, and then I'll stop sort of explicating this. But the big thing we do to get articles read as widely as we can is we publish articles on our website under a license called Creative Commons, which allows the pieces to be republished in multiple outlets for free. You can put different conditions on that, and the conditions we put on there are, number one, that the republishers have to credit us as the original source. So if you see one of our pieces in, say, Time or CNN or Business Insider on Scientific American's webpage, something like that, it will typically at the top or the bottom say, this originally appeared on The Conversation, link to the original. And the second condition we put is that the republishers cannot alter the content of the article without the author's permission. Sometimes outlets may, especially if they're a print outlet, have a very small space, and they'll say, we love this, but we can only take 700 words. Can you cut it down for us? So we'll help the author shorten it. Translation is an alteration, and a lot of our pieces get picked up and translated either by some of the other TC sites in places like Indonesia. It's very interesting to see one of your articles translated into Bahasa. It looks really different. So those kinds of things are typical, and usually it's fine, but we help authors figure out whether it makes sense or not. So anyway, as soon as we post articles every day, we immediately start pushing them out to republishers all across the country. We have a couple of really talented media relations guys on our staff who know what kind of articles are of interest to which outlets. We work with hundreds of outlets. They're anything from big national news sites like Time or CNN to more specialized ones, Scientific American, Business Insider, Government Executive, Religion News Service, all different kinds of things. We have all these funky websites. There's one called Fatherly that's about parenting for men that takes a lot of stuff about kids and families and children. One of my favorite environmental republishers is a surfer site called The Inertia. It takes most of our ocean science stories. And then all the way down to little local and regional newspapers all across the country who are looking for content that they know is solid and credible. So an article for us can end up in easily dozens of those sites. We have software on our site that lets authors see, it's not perfect tracking, but it lets them see at least a pretty good account of where their stuff has been published and how many people have viewed it, and they can see the latest tweets and all these things like that. So the scholars get feedback on where the articles are appearing and who's reading them, which is really nice for them. And they can use those metrics in their promotion packages and things like that, which is also good for them and is actually starting to be something that's factored into decisions at some of the universities we work with. That's very exciting. I can do a little tour of the web page if that sounds good. Should I do that? Okay. All right. I will share my screen. Some of you may have read our site, so I will try not to spend too long on this. Share. Okay, so this is today's homepage, and if you go to our site, www.theconversation.com/US, this is what you'll see. Here are our categories across the top. We are a multi-subject publication: arts and culture, economy and business, education, environment and energy, ethics and religion, health and medicine, politics and society, science and tech. So these are very broad categories. There's often overlap. We don't draw really sort of, fussy fine lines between them. We talk back and forth a lot, we editors among ourselves, about where a subject goes. You go to the environment page and see what we've got going on there right now. Yeah, so here we have, this is a story we just put up the other day because there's an atmospheric river formation going on in the Pacific Northwest. Someone had just done a study on it and wrote for us about how much damage they do. This story about young California ranchers was a really interesting piece of work from a postdoc who wants to be an agricultural extension agent and is looking at who's going into ranching in California. And she's finding that a lot of them are young women raising sheep and goats and figuring out ways to get paid for ecological services like grazing them on fire-prone hillsides. So a really interesting thing coming out of her research that we would never have found if we went out looking for it. She pitched it into us. We get articles both ways. People pitch articles to us and we read the journal traffic and lots of other things and reach out to scholars looking for stories. A lot of things, you can see things here. We have a look at why chlorpyrifos is being banned in California, although not federally. Youth climate sites, whales, earthquakes in Puerto Rico. We get a lot of interest in weather stories, natural disasters, things like that. Why is this happening? How big is it? Let me show our pitch portal because that's how to get into here if you want to pitch us a story. So you go to our homepage, you go down the right side past the big windows with most of the stories, and you have this little pitch an idea right here. Go into there, and first it asks you if you are a scholar. So what it's asking is, do you have a college or university appointment or a couple of other types of institutions we work with? If yes, great. It says, here's what we want. We want evidence-based analysis of news issues, new research, and explainers. There are others, but those are the main ones. So you say, I'm ready to pitch. And it gives you a pitch form. We really, really try to emphasize to people that we don't want full drafts, pre-written drafts sent to us. And the reason for that is partly because we have this particular approach that I explained of really coming from the scholarship and the knowledge and not from opinion. And because we have a lot of stories working all the time. So we may have things going in the area that you're thinking of. We really don't want people to spend a lot of time writing a draft and sending it to us and have us go, no, sorry, doesn't fit. We would much rather just talk up front about what you want to do and say, well, we have something working on that, but could you do this? So we ask 1 or 2 sentences, what's your story? And this is the basics of pitching. What's your story? Why now? What's significant about it? What else should we know? I just spent a year on a Fulbright in Iceland and I watched the boats not go out whaling. That was a story we just did. Do you have any multimedia stuff we can use? If not, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Is it relevant right now, in the future? Is it timeless? And then what section would you aim it for? If you're not sure, it's not a big deal. We're a small organization. We have 1 or 2 or 3 editors on our desks and we pass things around all the time. So that's really it. We really just want some short bullet points and it goes right to the relevant editors or desks. And if we have questions, we just email right back and say, what have you got? Actually, let me also show an author dashboard because that's a cool thing. So I will go first to my editing dashboard. Let me find one by someone who's written for us. Okay, so this is a story I'm editing that is by a professor at Ohio State University who was just involved in a big multi-year survey of views about animals. It's affiliated with the Interior Department and looking at support for hunting and wildlife, but he has written for us before. So here is his profile. This is what, you get an author profile that looks like this when you write for us. And you have a dashboard once you have published an article. And the dashboard has metrics about your articles for us. Let me get this banner thing out of the way. So he has written 3 articles for us. Here are the aggregated statistics for his articles. They've gotten a total of 50,000 some views, 19 comments, 9 received. And then when you click on one of them, it shows you the metrics for that article. So that one got half of his views. You can see the timing for it. Then you can see some of the republishers. So PBS NewsHour, High Country News out in the West, govexec.com, Crooks and Liars, which is a sort of lefty website, bunch of newspapers, lots of other things, and you can see some of the most recent comments. So it's a really interesting chance to get feedback on what you've done and, you know, interact with readers. We moderate the comments very carefully so we don't let people be abusive or post, you know, misleading stuff. We take that out. There. Why don't I stop there and see what people want to know and what they want to talk about?
Jenny, could you talk a little bit about that first box on the pitch submission form where it says, what's the story? And the difference between what you might see a lot as getting just a pitch for a topic as opposed to writing out what an actual story they want to write is.
Right, yeah, definitely. This is the distinction between a subject and a story is a really important one. And I was a freelancer for 10 years before I came here. I wrote for magazines, websites, I did work for universities, I did lots of stuff. And it took me several years to really, really internalize the difference between a subject and a story. So people may pitch and they will pitch something like, I'm a wildlife biologist and I want to write about endangered species, to which my reaction is, what do you want to say about them? And it's, well, there's a lot of species that are really on the edge. And that's still a subject. It's just the fact there's a lot of endangered species. What is the story? Do you have a particular species you're studying? Is something happening with it? Do you see, you know, federal action on this going some way? You know, so, you know, feral hogs, I edited a great story on feral hogs a few months ago. And so even just feral hogs by itself would be kind of a subject. I mean, people know that it's a thing. It's actually, there's a reality show about them, you know, and stuff. But just the fact that there are feral hogs is kind of, okay, fine. He had done a study down in Arkansas where he was at that point teaching. And they had been looking at how they affect the ecosystems where they are, and they had shown that they not only do a lot of damage to crops and fields, which is a real problem down there, but they also damage a lot of wild ecosystems and places where endangered species live and depend on them. So he said, be here. So that's a story. So, you know, the subject is, there is this thing, and the story is this, it's what it's doing, or what's going to happen to it, or why it's happening, something like that. I went to when I was freelancing, I did a few travel stories, although that's a very sort of specialized kind of genre of writing that's especially hard to learn. I went to a seminar that National Geographic Traveler magazine did, and they talked about this whole thing of pitching, and they said, don't pitch us and say, I'm going to Paris, would you like a story about Paris? So that's even lower than subject story, that's a destination. So they said, Paris is a destination. Paris in the December holidays could be a subject, but you know, you still need to get more specific than that. So they said, shopping for Hanukkah meals in the Paris Jewish markets in December, that's a story. So you're always sort of refining it and figuring out, you know, get to the top of the pyramid. And for them, they said, if you can get a great title on top, then the editors will swoop down on your pitch. We don't worry so much about that, but it was a good example of how you like refine the thing. What else?
If anybody has questions, you can either raise your hand virtually, unmute yourself if you want, or you can type it in the chat.
I have a question.
Sure.
I run a bunch of research projects, and I also have a group of graduate students who are taking a science communication class now. And I'm really keen to get both the people who are working on all these projects I direct and also these students to feel more comfortable with with communicating with general audiences. And it seems like the conversation could be a really great outlet. And I'm wondering, like, is the experience really different for people who are sort of already professors who start working with the conversation versus, graduate students who are more in this sort of training stage? And if you have any thoughts about like how I might talk to those two groups differently about getting involved in pitching for the conversation.
Sure. Well, let me say on graduate students, our rules for writing for us are that to write as a sole author, so that's just your article, you have to be a PhD student, and with very rare exceptions, you have to focus on your dissertation research. And that's the idea, is that if you're a scholar, we want you to focus on the thing where you're creating knowledge, right? If it was some other research project that you were deeply involved in, okay, fine, that's cool too. But you can't sort of range way outside your lane. We're not going to have like a sustainability scholar write about, what Trump's doing to the EPA or something like that, because that's really a political thing. So, but anyway, as far as student eligibility, excuse me, PhD students can also, and master students can co-author with a professor. And that's pretty common, especially if the professor wants their students to get some experience communicating this stuff to people who aren't scholars. So that partnering thing is really good. If you have a study where, excuse me, the professor's got grad students, wants to have them involved in doing this, they can work on the article together. And that way the students are, listed as authors, whether they're first or second, whatever. They see the process, they see the editing and how they start with the text that they came up with and what it ends up with. So that could be a really good thing. Don't presume that graduate students will be less able to do this than professors will, because first of all, I think a lot of people at the grad student level, first of all, are much more used to social media and to communicating that way. And so they understand sort of the value of saying things briefly and just sort of how ideas can bounce around and that kind of thing. So I think they're just more sort of open to that way of communicating and of making something interesting in ways that we can pitch out to the social media world and stuff. So, and some professors are really into it and get it, and some professors don't get it at all. And some people, we contact them and they're just like, I have no time for that and I'm not interested. And we're like, okay, fine. So it's not like everybody's dying to do this, first of all. Some scholars really get it. Some scholars don't get it at first, and then they do an article or two with us and they're like, okay, I'm starting to get the hang of it here. So everybody's learning curve is different. We have some great stuff that graduate students have written for us that's been really good. One place that we've gotten grad students to write for us, just reaching out to them directly, is, I don't know if people know what the Grad Slam is at the UC system. It's a contest they do at all the UC schools every year. I think it's been going for 5 years or so, where on every campus, they have a contest for master's and PhD students to get up and explain your research in 5 minutes and not be technical. And they have like workshops and things for them to practice, public speaking and doing stuff like this. So they have a contest on each campus, and the winner from each campus, all the winners come together and they go up against each other in sort of the grand round. And the president of the university judges it, and I think the winner gets like $5,000 and the second place gets $3,000. So we reach out to Grad Slam winners who have interesting topics and are like, hey, would you write that for us? I think it's more, it's not so much your seniority level. I think it's openness to wanting to do that kind of thing. I think there are really clear benefits for grad students and young scholars in doing this, because just having to really express your ideas in a succinct way, it gives you an elevator speech, which is really valuable for when you're going to meetings and doing job talks and things like that. I think being able to sort of boil things down, and then, later you can unpack them in much more detail if people want to hear it. But I think being able to sort of understand, how do I say, here are the key points, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's how I got to this conclusion, is really useful in a lot of different ways. The exposure can lead to people, we've done surveys of our authors, and people have reported getting lots of people get called for interviews by other media when they see our stories. We know that a lot of public radio stations look at our stories and call the authors for phone interviews and things. So that can lead you to exposure that's valuable. Some authors have gotten actually book contracts. That's not super common, but it happens, out of things like that. When they're clearly really laying out something interesting, and a university press editor will see it and say, I'm looking for things in this area, can we talk? People get collaboration requests from other scholars in their field. I'm organizing a panel on this. Do you want to be on it? So people looking for that. I would say people looking to connect. That's a real plus for this kind of thing. It may be that for grad students, doing some of our short forms would be a good way to get started in it. But we've had PhD students who've jumped right into full-length articles. So I think a lot of it is attitude, but I think those skills can really benefit people at most any level.
And Jenny, this is the professor I was telling you about at Arizona State that has a class where one of the assignments is to get an article published.
Oh, okay, sure.
And Athena, Jenny mentioned that as a side note, there are certain universities or schools that are, what do you call them, partner universities?
Partner universities. So about half of our funding comes from 70-some partner universities and colleges that support us financially because they like what we're doing and they think there ought to be an outlet like this. For those schools, we process their pitches faster and we guarantee them all an answer within typically 5 business days. So anybody who pitches us from Arizona State will get a response with, reasons why or why not. We try to answer everybody promptly, of course, but we have we get hundreds of pitches a week. So, we have to do a little triage with it. The fact that the school supports us, let me just say, does not mean we take everything they pitch to us. Everything has to meet the same quality standard.
And is there a list of which universities are your partner universities?
It's on our website. If you go to the front page and just scroll way down past the stories.
Okay.
Yep.
I've got in the comments, somebody has a question and I don't want to mispronounce the name. It's spelled Loulia.
Yeah, it's Yulia. So my question is seemingly similar to a few others, but for instance, I just graduated with a PhD. I just finished my dissertation. I know a lot about my field, but my specific research may be not a good story. If I wanted to write, so I study harvester ants. If I wanted to study about ant behavior in general and reference someone else's work, would that be good for your for your outlet? Like if I contact the other researchers and they're okay with me doing a story. And then the second question is, I might have missed it if I came in late, but do we have to pay to be on your site? Do we get paid to be on your site? Is it like exposure if we get our article published, that kind of thing?
Right. Okay. So no one has to pay to be on our site. We are totally nonprofit. Part of our funding is from universities. The other part is foundations. It's about 50-50. So no, it will not cost you at all. We don't get any money from republishers. We don't have any ads, none of that. It's completely nonprofit model. If you have just graduated, if you're not still affiliated with your school, are you on a postdoc or something, or what's your status? Yeah, you have to have a current academic affiliation. So that would be a thing. So now if you go into a postdoc or something like that, I mean, we just have to have, since we say that we're a place for academics to publish, we have to have some kind of definition of who's an academic and who's not. So you have to have at least one foot on a campus somehow, doing something, and we try to make sure that it's real. I mean, we'll take people who are adjuncts if we know they're at least really teaching or really researching at the school. I mean, some appointments, my husband teaches at the Kennedy School, and there are a lot of appointments there that just mean you come in and have lunch once a year. So that kind of thing doesn't count, but anyway, so assuming that you've had some kind of current appointment at a school, you could pitch, and writing about something related to your work, that would be fine. We try not to be like super, you can only write about this species of ant, we would not do that. We would want to see that you had done some work and hopefully published something that clearly is in that sphere. So we know that that's, something where, you've got some things to say. But you can be ranging a bit beyond that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
And then I think the answer is no, but you don't pay writers for pieces, right?
We do not. No, we are nonprofit in all directions.
Okay, I've got a question for
Strictly
Matt.
nonprofit.
Do you have any advice for researchers whose work is they think really cool but still far from making practical impacts on the real world, such as still based on in vitro work?
That would be a thing to pitch to the relevant editor because, you know, I mean, we certainly do articles that are about basic research. So we will often ask people to sort of say, one thing that this might inform in the future could be this. So it doesn't always have to be super applied, super in the real world right now. And we do, you know, a lot of our science, one of our science editors, not Maggie, but another one who is out right now, does a lot of space stories that are, you know, these wild things about exoplanets and stuff like that, that are, you know, I mean, you know, that's cool and that could lead to things, but it's certainly not like we're going to colonize them now or something. So, you know, things that are interesting, that make people think about the world in a different way, that, you know, sort of suggest to them that things are happening right around them that they never knew about, whether or not it's like super applied, that's fine.
And then I have a question from Erin here, but you may have already answered it. Erin, did you get your answer from what Jenny said previously, or do you still want me to ask it?
Can I ask it?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Erin. Hi. Your page says academics and researchers. So I'm an academic, but I don't do research. So what does that category really, how would that apply to somebody who has expertise in an area but isn't actively researching a particular angle? Is there an angle that you look for from people more generally that we could contribute to?
Yeah, well, what we're trying to get at there is honestly just sort of people who are doing knowledge at universities and colleges, really, because there's people who aren't, you don't want to say professors, because a lot of people aren't professors. They're, you know, a research technician or something like that, lab director, you know, things like that. And then there's some people who are in administration at universities, but are positioned to talk about things like how a change in federal funding limits could really affect things there. So yeah, that's fine. I mean, we want to see sort of that you're doing something in an academic setting that is, you know, relevant to the topic that you want to write about and you have knowledge about it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think then Brooke's question has been answered. What about academics turn freelance? You have to have an appointment. So unless you have an appointment and you freelance, it's probably okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me just say there are a few other organizations that we take articles from, mainly government agencies that have a research mission. So we'll take articles from National Park Service, NOAA, USGS, National Center for Atmospheric Research, those places like that are federally funded, that their science is for the public. And that's really about it. Those are really pretty much the only exceptions. So no, not private labs, no like privately funded research organizations, no NGOs. I've had people at NGOs with PhDs desperately want to write for us. I'm just like, I'm sorry, you know, Polar Bear International is not academic. I love your science, but I can't take it, you know.
Let's see. Do you guys cover anything related to cell biology / biochemistry / development? Kind of building on Matt's basic science question.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, we'd want to see, you know, what the issue was and why it needs to be relevant to something going on now, typically. Although, or it might sort of offer some explanations of something happening now. I wish I were a biologist because I could explain this better. But yeah. Sorry, I haven't edited a basic. I tend to get very applied stuff, you know, for environment, especially with all the environmental controversies and, you know, issues going on right now.
I would guess maybe something like developing, like the science behind developing a vaccine, where maybe it seems pretty in the basic science until something like coronavirus pops up, and then it's really relevant.
Right. Yeah, that could be, definitely. You know, and I guess we have, I mean, like I do a lot of stories about weather that are just explaining basic phenomena. So, you know, I mean, anything that's sort of like, you know, I mean, I'm not sure I would do an article that's like, what is convection? But, you know, maybe I might. I mean, or, you know, we've certainly done things, what is a bomb cyclone and how does it form? And so sometimes we just, you know, look for people who know just the basic physics and things like that of you know, how storms happen and sort of motion in the atmosphere and things. So yeah, definitely these would all be worth, you know, pitching to our science editors though and seeing what they say.
And the Curious Kids questions, is that something that's open to graduate students or anybody?
Those we tend to reach out on because we collect from teachers we know actual questions that we're using. So those tend to be ones where we collect those and then we reach out to people and say, I have this Curious Kids question. Like I've got one right now about what is the slowest thing on Earth. So actually, there actually are different ways you can answer that question. But I mean, I went first because someone had just written for me who was a primatologist and just said, I know that a sloth is typically not a primate, but I'm sure you've been around them. Do you want to write this? Let me say one way that we get people to write for us when we have a general topic like this, but many people could do it, is that we send this list of requests, we call it the expert request, to all the communications people that are linked into us at all our partner schools every day. And it's a list of topics where we're looking for someone. So if I hadn't had that person in mind, I might have put a thing on there that said, for one of our Curious Kids pieces, which are short and written to a middle school reading level, I am looking for someone who can write about primates or things related to sloths, about why the sloth is the slowest thing on Earth and why it's good to be slow. And then they connect us, the communications staff connect us with people who they think can do that and who want to do that.
So
one good thing to know about writing for us is, especially if you look and see that your school is one of our partner schools, get to know your communications people in your school, your division, your unit or whatever, and, you know, tell them you heard about this and you're interested and you know that, hey, this is Arizona State. So, you know, they're going to pay attention when they get a pitch from us. We pay attention to everybody again, but, you know, they will definitely pay attention to us because we're ASU and we work with them. So because the communications people get regular messages from us and have contact with people here who do university relations with them and know what kinds of things we're looking for. And they can say, we've got this postdoc who's doing this really cool research on this thing. Is that something that might be of interest?
What is the typical or average timeline between the pitch and a published piece?
Well, if it's on coronavirus, it can be about 6 hours right now. But, you know, certainly for things that aren't sort of a breaking news story, you know, we're not super well, we don't literally break new news because we don't have reporters out there on the street reporting the stuff. We're always at least the day after story or the third day story or the fourth day story. But, you know, when we get pitches that are about things in the news that are really going on, we can move a story and edit it in a day or two. Typically a story gets at least 2 rounds of edits from us. So 1 round of edit just on the text, back to the author revises it, then it comes back. Usually in the second round, we work on the images for it and, you know, the subheads and fine tuning and things like that. And it gets a couple of reviews at our end. So the process is usually maybe a couple of days, but not like you're doing it all day. But you I guess Saturday night was looking at the news and saw some tweet about, you know, big atmospheric river forecast coming at the Pacific Northwest. And I had this draft in my list of draft stories because I had reached out to someone who'd done a study on them on atmospheric rivers. And I was like, ooh, better pull that up. So I just went ahead and edited it, sent it to the author and said, hey, are you around on Sunday? And can we get this edited up on Monday? Which we did. So we can move fast when we have to. We don't always have to. One particular thing, though, with scientific studies is that when scholars have a study coming out, especially in a high-level journal, we love to know ahead of time so that they can write a short piece on it for us that explains it in English, and we can have it ready to go right when the embargo lifts on the study. Because then we can just it comes off embargo at 2 o'clock, we post the story at 2:01, and we can tell a lot of our republishers ahead of time, we have a short piece that explains this polar bear study that's going to be in the cover story in Science next week, and they know that, and they'll just be like, okay, we'll take that, send it to us as soon as it's ready. So if you have something coming out in a journal, especially one, you know, proceedings or, you know, conservation biology or science or, you know, Nature, anything like that, anything that's high in your field, especially if you have, I know it's hard to focus when you have a big study coming out in a journal because you're getting press called ahead and all that. But if you're interested, we love it when we can do that, because then we can have it all ready to go all ahead of time. And the article can help drive traffic to the study.
Another editing question: is most of the work you do making articles more concise and straightforward, or do you also do scientific fact checking?
That's a good question. Most of it is on the communicating part, making it readable and concise. We work with authors to choose the visuals that go with it. So the authors are not obliged to provide, images, photos, stuff like that, but they're welcome to. So often, we'll say, if you have anything to suggest, let me know, send me the links to it. Otherwise, we'll propose things and say, do you like these? Do you want to work with this? Does this work or not? Is this the right rhino? I once was editing a story on saving Javan rhinos. And the author was like, this is a great photo, but it's a Sumatran rhino, so we really need a Javan rhino. I was like, okay. We do look at all our stories have links to research and data sources in them that back up what the author is saying, the major claims. And that's a really important way that we show this is a knowledge-based article. This is not just someone who says, I can tell you that years of research have shown this is true. We want the links. And we will look at those references and say, does this say what the author claims it says? Now, we can't peer review the whole study and say, is this true? And can we peer review every claim in it? We look to see that they're citing things that are in mainstream authoritative publications. We do not have a fact checker on staff. It's something we want to do when we get enough funding, enough staff. It's what's on our list. But so we look at, what the sources are. We ask people not to cite, I would not have people citing Greenpeace as a source, or right-wing things. I just would be like, cite mainstream authoritative places.
I was wondering, do you offer any training or internships, or is there a place that you would suggest writers go to learn more about science communication?
Mm-hmm. We do have an intern every term, typically an undergrad. Often they're in communications. I think we would probably consider students in the sciences who applied, especially if they said they were interested in science communications. Let me emphasize again that we are not just a science outlet. We have people doing business and politics and arts and religion and all kinds of stuff. So science would not automatically be a foot in the door. But if they were in a subject and wanted to also learn about doing the media part, that would be possible. I would say, certainly if people are interested in potentially pitching to us, read our page. It's just, and that's true for, when I was a freelancer and I wanted to get something into Discover or the Boston Globe magazine or any outlet, honestly, you just have to read that outlet and get their style and their feel in your head and look at what kind of stories they do. One thing people can do that makes it really easy is that at the top of our webpage, there's a little envelope and it says get our newsletter. So you click on that and you can get it on weekday mornings, which is the way I would recommend doing it. If you do that, you will get one email weekday mornings. It has links to all the news stories we've posted that day. That is it. You will not get spam. You won't get ads. You can also get a Saturday one that's sort of our picks for best of the week, and a Sunday one that's the 5 most read stories. But that's a good way to do it. Or you can, there are our Twitter feeds for all the different topics. So you could follow like Conversation US Environment on Twitter, see all our stories there, just to see like, what are we covering? So you start seeing what kinds of stories do we like? What are we doing? Which doesn't mean that if you, have a story about how all the new ranchers in California are young women raising sheep and goats, that we're not interested. We're really interested actually. So, but it shows you like what we're doing and what kind of things we're interested in. So that's a good thing to do. I would say, if there are opportunities on your campus to just learn how to do, public speaking, how to do a good poster presentation, any of that stuff, any opportunities to get training in just presenting your stuff and explaining it and putting it out there, go to those, because this is not natural for anybody, or very few people. Anyway, You know, many of us are introverts. I'm a very introverted journalist, and I have a bunch of friends who are the same thing. We have a little shy journalist club. It's not natural for journalists to be asking people questions all the time and calling them up. But actually having the shield of an assignment always made me feel better. I was like, I'm calling for an article for Discover magazine, you know. So I bet you want to talk to me now, don't you? You know. So I would say, you know, something like the California Grad Slam, the UC school thing like that, anything like that. If there's any opportunities to go to something like the program that Alan Alda helped start at SUNY Stony Brook that does science communication, you know, that's sort of a high level thing, but faculty who have professional development money might think of that. I know someone who's an atmospheric chemist who got some professional development money, and that's what he did. So I'd say just look for opportunities to just find out how to connect in writing, how to connect in words, how to listen to people, you know, just all that stuff.
I think we've got one more question. We might have time for one or two more if people want to throw them in the chat. Would research on scientific communication or engagement fit into the science section?
It could, yeah. We've done some stories on that. One other thing, if you're interested in potentially pitching something to us, go on our website. You can search by topic, look for what we've done. And that's really important at any outlet that you want to get into. And, you know, as a freelancer, I always did that, because you really don't want to pitch to a place and have them say, oh, we just did that, it's on the newsstand right now. Because that tells them you're not reading their stuff and looking at it. So, you know, look at what we've done. And if we've done stories on it, think about, what can I say that adds to this, that builds on this? You know, it can be related. We have plenty of stories about, you know, regulation and how to do regulation in a smarter or less smart way. It doesn't mean we're done with it. You just have to have something new to add to it. Yeah, so yeah, definitely. We've done stuff on that. Take a look. If it's new findings, definitely. That's always new research, new findings. You know, a survey that shows something new, something like that. You know, we'd always look at that.
I just want to reiterate how important it is to search for the topic you're writing about in the publication, especially for office hours. It's slightly embarrassing if you pitch something that has been written about. So always search multiple types of search words.
Yeah. It may happen if you pitch something that whatever outlet you pitch to comes back and says, oh, sorry, we have something on that in the works. That happened to be so many times as a freelancer. And at first I'd be like, no, you don't really, do you? You know, but after a while, it's just like, you know, there are not that many original ideas in this world. And you know, and now certainly being on this side, I know. And so if that happens to you, take that as a compliment, because you were thinking like an editor. You know, you were thinking ahead. People will want to know about this. You just maybe weren't quite up with them, but you were close behind. So, you know, that means you're going in the right direction. And pitching overall, there's a lot of rejection pitching. If you can get a little bit of feedback about why does this not work, then that's really helpful. But, you know, honestly, great baseball hitters strike out 70% of the time. So, you know, in pitching things, you have to not let some rejections or, you know, just people saying we'll pass or not answering, which I know is really frustrating. I used to hate it when editors would do that. I answer every pitch I get. Don't let those make you think you're doing it wrong. There's a really high volume, and some people are nicer about connecting back than others are, but it's just, you know, it's tough, and you have to be, you know, have a hard shell, and, you know, you always just be thinking about the next one.
And
I struck out at least 70% of the time pitching as a freelancer.
And on pitching in the Slack channel, the SciCommers Slack channel, we have a channel called Peer Edits Advice. That's a great place that if you want to pitch something, if you don't want to go through office hours and you just want to pitch on your own, send a call out for people to get eyes on it. And then the Open Notebook has a pitch database, which I'm sure
those are really good. Yeah, look at pitches that worked. I used to belong to a freelancers group that had its own bulletin board where we all contributed pitches that we'd done that were successful and talked about what we thought helped and why. And so, yeah, definitely look at, you know, how other people are doing it and what's worked for them. If you know a professor or a researcher who publishes a lot or who speaks a lot, ask them how they do it. Ask them, you know, just like follow, I mean, a lot of people ask sort of, what good is social media? Should I be on social media? I'm just a postdoc in a lab. What can I say? Use it as a listening tool. Use it to follow people who are interesting, journalists who you're interested in, outlets you're interested in. Follow researchers in your field who are good communicators and see what they talk about and how they connect with their peers, and just sort of, what kind of discussions they have. I mean, I find that really interesting. And I've gotten articles from reaching out to scientists who I saw discussing things on Twitter, people I knew already. I wouldn't do it with someone I didn't know at all, but I've seen people having exchanges and emailed them and said, hey, would you turn that into 800 words for us on why this idea is so wrong? Because I know they can do it, but I just, wouldn't have thought of it except I saw them. This happened when the Amazon fires were really big last fall, and I saw an atmospheric scientist who'd written for us, tweeting with some other ones about, why does everybody think we're going to suffocate? Don't they know most of the oxygen in the atmosphere comes from the oceans? And they were like, oh no, nobody gets it. And then they started doing the math sort of back of the envelope. And I was like, write that down. And it did really, really well.
Great. Well, I think we've got 2 more minutes left. Is there anything else you want to add generally about anything?
I would say, honestly, just, I think it's really, really useful in so many ways to try to communicate about your work, sort of beyond, the campus and beyond your group. Read a lot of things that aren't just in your field. And I know everybody's busy. I'm so busy. My pile of stuff to read at home is like that. But, I try to read just a lot of different outlets. I read a lot shorter stuff than you guys do, but, many more of them. Just you start to see interesting ideas, because if you're looking at lots of different things, you see what bubbles up and you see what catches your eye and what's interesting. And use some social media, if not to say stuff, then really to listen and follow interesting people, because then you start seeing also, follow like hashtags that are relevant to the work you do, and just see, what do people talk about? Are they interested in this? Gee, nobody understands this question about whatever it is. That can be a really good thing for an article. I mean, when I was a freelancer, I often, when I finished an interview, especially with someone who was a big name in their field or was doing interesting work, would say, is there anything that people just get wrong about your work a lot that you want to correct? And I would great answers. People would be like, oh my God, let me tell you. So those can be a really good sort of occasion for an article, is why everybody thinks this wrong thing. Or just an explainer. Everybody is wondering about, why are soybeans such a big deal in world trade? Things you just hear people sort of asking all around, all over the place, just curious. People are curious and like to just sort of feel like they learned a new fact, and doing something short and simple that just answers a simple question is not, a lower kind of writing. It's often quicker and easier, but there's nothing wrong with that. And people out there may not be in your field, but they just really like to feel like they learned something. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jenny. Yeah. I hope you get.
And thank you on behalf of Maggie. She's sorry that she couldn't stay, but like she said, she had to go edit more coronavirus stories. But yes, feel free to pitch us. Our pitch portal's on the webpage. Our emails and Twitter addresses are on our staff bios, which are like way down at the bottom of the webpage. So, if you have questions and you want to follow up, feel free to contact me. Totally.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you. Yes, read. And get our newsletter. Great. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.